Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. I hope everybody is having an awesome day. We are almost to the weekend, which feels really good because as we talked about yesterday, this week just feels like a Groundhog Day. Like I feel like I just keep waking up every day and it's the same day and I do the same thing and it feels like Monday over and over and over again. So I'm glad we are almost there to the weekend and I hope you guys feel the same way. Thank you so much for tuning in yesterday to talk about everything that was happening in Maui, Hawaii. I am still looking for a reputable source that we can all be financially contributing to help those who are affected by the fires. But early reports this morning show that 36 people so far have lost their lives. Many family pets have lost their lives. And obviously hundreds of people have lost their homes, their businesses, their churches, and more. So please continue to keep the people of the town of Lahaina in your prayers and the entire island of Maui. More than 11,000 people have been evacuated from their homes and from the island. So it's a really scary time for so many people. And the updated videos that I'm seeing on TikTok are just absolutely crazy. So keep them in your prayers still and keep getting the word out there. They desperately need our help. And I will keep looking for a great place that we can all be financially contributing as well as soon as possible. Today's stream is a pre-recorded one. I am always transparent with you guys about that because I am headed to the airport this afternoon during our normal streaming time for a flight to Alabama. Brock and I are going to a wedding this weekend for a longtime family friend of his. So very exciting. I feel like we've gone to like 25 million weddings in the last few months, which is awesome because I love weddings and we're getting a little bit closer to our wedding and we're knee deep in the planning of all of that. So today's stream and tomorrow's stream are pre-recorded while I am traveling, but wanted to make sure you guys still got a stream because you have been so great in regularly tuning in every single day with a ton of new viewers every single day as well. So especially if you are new, introduce yourself to us and to each other in the live chat. Don't forget you can still use the live chat even when these are pre-recorded, and I try to be active in the live chat throughout our pre-recorded streams as well wherever I can. Do me a huge favor as we're getting started for the stream today and hit that heart or like button, ring the little notification bell so that you are always aware of when we are live and when we upload a new video. And of course, on whatever platform you are on right now, we're live on YouTube, Facebook, Rumble, and Getter, and of course on Locals. Smash that follow or subscribe button to help this channel grow and get these conversations out there to people who need to hear it most. Okay, let's jump right in. Today's going to be a really fun one. I am blind reacting. I've never read this before. We're going to read it in real time together to a new Teen Vogue article that claims to be the arbiter of truth for what is a conservative. Something tells me really deep down in my gut that they have absolutely no idea what they are talking about and couldn't possibly understand what a conservative is compared to the rest of humanity. But nonetheless, I'm excited to read this article. And you guys know how much we love to unpack everything that Teen Vogue has to say. If you're new to the stream and you haven't read Teen Vogue in a while, forget about it being a fashion magazine for teenagers or like what to wear on your first date or how to show up for the first day of school or what to do when that boy has a crush on you. No. Now they publish articles like Reliving My Abortion or Why Karl Marx is the greatest political figure of all time. And of course, this one that we're blind reacting to today, What is a Conservative? I'm really excited to read this, and I know you guys should be too. So Teen Vogue here with a beautiful picture of the Gipper. Oh, we love this man. What is a conservative? Understanding how the term works in American politics. This is a column that they run in the magazine that decodes the lingo of American politics and media. Boy, this is going to be good. It's also supported by the journalism nonprofit, the Economic Hardship Reporting Project. Interesting. The evergreen questions raised by the label conservative are conserving what and from whom? Let's dispense with one popular answer to this question, asserted by many American conservatives and liberals alike, that proper conservatives are devoted to small government or engaged in protecting individual liberties from a big government. That seems to me to be a pretty all-encompassing definition of what it means to be conservative, but we've only gotten, 4 sentences into this article, so I highly doubt that that's really what they're going to tell us. These are the slogans of today's Republican Party, but there's no good argument to believe that the party behind the war on drugs, interesting, the first and second Iraq war, massive police funding, eliminating the right to abortion. We talked about this week already, but is there any constitutional or legal right to an abortion federally in America? Crickets? No, there is not. So I'm so tired of these companies writing this. Don't say gay laws. Tell me you know nothing about what's going on in the state of Florida, Teen Vogue, without telling me. And school book bans, again, tell me you know nothing about what's going on in the state of Florida without telling me, is, in any way that makes sense, devoted to limiting the power of the government. To make sense of the word conservative, we have to dig deeper than headlines and slogans. Like a lot of our political vocabulary, see also left and right. The political meaning of conservative came as a result of the French Revolution of 1789, when democratic radicals deposed the monarchy and the aristocracy. We're working on our French, Le Conservateur, that first used the word conservative in the modern political sense. The magazine listed what it stood for in its first issue: religion, the king, liberty, and upstanding people. These were things under threat from the new society formed after the revolution. They have already lost me in this, because if you understood anything about what it literally means to be a conservative with conserving limited government from a far too powerful, tyrannical, big government, you would know that the French Revolution only happened in 1789 because of what happened in the United States of America in 1776. Overthrowing a monarchy, very similar to what happened in France, obviously ended up at very dramatically different places a couple hundred years later, but overthrowing a too powerful monarchy that had unlimited authoritarian control over the people, that engaged in taxation without representation, that didn't have a voice for the people whatsoever. The government was not of the people, by the people, and for the people, and was too powerful and tyrannical, necessitating conserving God-given liberties, individual liberties, from too powerful political entities currently in existence. That's the founding of conservatism. It had nothing to do with the king or preserving a monarchy in opposition to a French Revolution or true democracy or a democratic republic. In reality, it had everything to do with those things. So a new society formed after the revolution is by definition a conservative society. Conservatism was not under threat by the people who engaged in the French Revolution or the American Revolution just a few years before that. You've already lost me, Teen Vogue, but let's see where you keep going. Modern day conservatives don't necessarily want to protect or conserve the same things as their 19th century brethren. Not too many Americans will admit to being monarchists. Again, the monarchy, okay, I can't. But they do share a fundamental dilemma with their French forebears. Defining yourself in terms of an old order and its enemies makes it difficult to explain the sort of future that you want to build. On one hand, conservatives defend tradition and duty. On the other, these definitions of these things shift with every generation. And what good is tradition if it changes all the time? Does it have to change all the time? In 1790, the Irishman Edmund Burke authored Reflections on the Revolution in France, a polemic against the revolution that has become the foundational text of English language conservatives. Has Reflections on the Revolution in France been the foundational text of English language conservatives? Because I feel like, call me crazy, I've never read this ever. I might have in high school, but I don't remember reading it. Whereas I have read the Federalist Papers. I have read documents written by our founding fathers. I have read John Locke and English thinkers and philosophers throughout the Renaissance period that were pushing for more well-rounded thought and individual participation in society and individual liberty and preserving your God-given rights free from a far too authoritarian government as my foundational texts of conservatism. Interesting that you just decide, Teen Vogue, that one person's book against the French Revolution is what is determining what it means to be a conservative for anyone who speaks English. Fascinating. I thought we didn't like generalizations. I thought that was like not okay or something. Burke didn't share the backwards looking attitude of their predecessor magazine. He conceded that societies needed to transform over time, but he argued for a principle of social change that followed the example of changes in nature or families, that is, slowly over generations and never all at once. Burke thought society should conserve what is worthy about past traditions, making judgments about what should and should not endure. I think that's a pretty fair assessment, to be honest with you. I'd note this is the difference between a preservative, which preserves something, whether it be strawberries or something else, just the way it was, and a conservative, which conserves something about it. Literally, what are you even trying to say in that sentence? That's a lot of words that sound really academic, but pretty much mean nothing. As Burke wrote, a state without the means of some change is without the means of its conservation. In other words, a society and its traditions cannot endure unless it can also change. This brings us to the original question, what should change and what should endure, and what is the principle by which one decides? Again, conservatives face the problem of defining themselves negatively against what they dislike. Liberal, by contrast, takes its name from a positive ideal, liberty. Conservative, much like progressive, names only an attitude about political change over time. In 1960, the economist Friedrich Hayek, which many people would describe as politically conservative, wrote an essay entitled Why I Am Not a Conservative, in which he argued that conservatives had not overcome this basic problem. By its very nature, he wrote, conservatism cannot offer an alternative to the direction in which we are moving. It defined itself only against other political identities, he wrote, decrying what is against without offering a positive direction of its own. Political scientist Corey Robin has recently argued that conservatism's most consistent traits are 1, a veneration of hierarchy and order, and 2, a fear of the lower orders. Here we go. Here's where we're going to get to all the phobias that we all inevitably have, right? Though it is often claimed that the left stands for equality while the right stands for freedom, this notion misstates the actual disagreement between right and left. Historically, the conservative has favored liberty for the higher orders and constraint for the lower orders. That is the single biggest load of crap I have ever heard. Ever. Liberty means for everyone. We the people means everyone, if you're looking at this through the lens of American conservatism. And, he goes on, it has historically defined itself against the movements it opposes. To be fair, all political persuasions define themselves in part by what they are against, but it's especially true of those darn conservatives whose very name signals commitment to conserving something being lost or taken away. This helps to explain the never-ending identity crisis that shapes so much of the culture of American conservatives, which is engaged in constant arguments about what it means to be a true conservative. Fair assessment. That's the only criticism I've agreed with so far, and we'll come back to that. And the confessional mini-genre of articles called Why Am I a Conservative? It also explains why so many on the right battle phantoms. It's a phantom. Woo! Like wokeness, the phantom of critical race theory, which isn't real. It's a ghost. It's not really happening in society. Or the gay agenda, forever seeking new enemies to define themselves against. Seeking a more positive definition, CPAC defines conservatism as the political philosophy that sovereignty resides in the person. Unfortunately for CPAC, plenty of political philosophers would say that this is also a definition of liberalism. One of the most eloquent rejoinders to the veneration of tradition in conservative thought, wow, they are really writing this like a PhD dissertation, aren't they? Comes from the American revolutionary Thomas Paine, who criticized Burke's opposition to the French Revolution. What, Paine asked, are you actually for? Like American conservatives who proclaim their commitment to conservative values in a society riven by inequality, fear, and violence, Paine thought Burke was enchanted more by talking about virtue than he was by building a society that supported it. Burke pities the plumage, wrote Paine, but forgets the dying bird. That's it? That's the article? So you never really gave us a definition of what conservative means at all. You wrote an entire article called "What is a Conservative?" and you never gave us a definition of what a conservative is. Wow, I'm like actually low-key disappointed. Like, I wanted them to give me a definition. I was seeking a definition there. I have a lot of thoughts, and I'll start with the one part of the article I actually do agree with, that there does seem to be somewhat of an identity crisis that keeps getting brought back up over and over and over again to describe the culture of American conservatism, and we are engaged in constant arguments about what it means to be a true conservative, sometimes to our own downfall. And I have been really outspoken about this throughout the last several years. I've gotten a lot of flack for it on very high-profile podcasts and television talk shows and everything, that we often are a lot more obsessed with fighting each other over what a real conservative is, depending on who our chosen political candidate is in a primary for the presidency, depending on how we feel about a particular issue on the litany list of issues that we are facing in American culture and politics today. And we often seem much more intent on shutting down bad conservatives or not real conservatives than linking arms and banding together to fight people who are seeking to destroy the very nature of conservatism at the get-go. So I do actually totally agree with that assessment of what's happening with the current nature of American conservatism. And I think we're seeing a lot of that in this particular presidential primary right now going into 2024 as from Teen Vogue's perspective. I actually totally agree with that. But to claim that you're going to give me a definition for what it means to be a conservative, and then you halfway touch on everybody else's definitions, but you never provide your own, seems to me that you're just writing for the sake of writing. Like I said, they wrote this article almost like they were trying to write a PhD dissertation, and it feels like they just like plugged something into ChatGPT or like a random text generator, and it just went for the sake of writing an article rather than to actually make an individual point or to provide a counter perspective to what most people would consider a conservative to be. I think it's fair to assume that multiple different people giving you an authority on the subject would have multiple different definitions, but that in and of itself, in my opinion, is a pretty conservative value to have differing definitions on what it means to conserve the very nature of individualism and individual liberty. In truth, conservatism, I actually really liked the definition that was provided by CPAC, is about the political philosophy that sovereignty resides in the person. I think that's a really short, sweet, to the point definition that encompasses pretty much everything that we do believe in. We believe that you as one human being should have sovereignty over your own life. We believe that you as one human being, as one individual, are created in the image of God, just like anybody else, and are worthy of the same rights, respect, and dignity as any other person on the face of the planet, particularly under your political system and your system of governance that you are living through. We believe that your rights come from God. They do not come from the government, and therefore you are the protector of your rights rather than the government handing out whatever rights they think should exist and they think shouldn't exist and taking those things away whenever they find those things to be politically convenient or expedient for them. I like that definition, conservatism being the political philosophy that sovereignty resides in the person, not in a king, not in a president, not in a Congress, not in a dictatorship, but between you and God, and that's pretty much it. And I think that really goes back to our founding as a country, right? The unfortunate reality for the people who write this article is that if you look at the classical definition of liberalism and the classical definition of conservatism, they're almost synonymous when you look at what today's definition of left and right look like in American politics. Even if we Google liberal and conservative, I'm really curious to see what comes up. Because sadly, today's classical liberals that exist in 2023, if you would truly call yourself a liberal under modern standards in 2023 America, you are politically a conservative. You would sway more to the right than to the left, because today's left wing of American politics really has nothing to do with liberalism. It has to do with authoritarianism. So we're going to pull up that definition too, because I think it is important for us to understand. Okay, so if you Google the word conservative, the dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary, says that you are, 1, averse to change or innovation and holding traditional values. I don't think you're necessarily adverse to innovation if you're looking at that's not a political context. That's just in general. I think in a political context, you aren't necessarily adverse to innovation, because if you look at the definition right below, if you do look in a political context, you do favor free enterprise, which in and of itself involves innovation. So I don't know how much I like that definition, but holding traditional values and holding tradition in the forefront of your mind, I do think is a very conservative value. They say in a political context, if you are a conservative, you typically favor free enterprise, private ownership, again, that sovereignty of the individual, and socially traditional ideas. Then they say a noun of a conservative is just a person who holds all of those things. If you jump over to liberal, you are 1, willing to respect or accept behavior or opinions different from one's own and open to new ideas. 2, you are relating to or denoting a political and social philosophy that promotes individual rights, civil liberties, democracy, and free enterprise. So the dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary, says if you promote individualism and free enterprise, you are both a liberal and a conservative. Hence why everybody is going to have a different definition for what these words actually mean, and you have to deal with building a coalition of people who have slightly differing definitions of all of these things, but generally can agree on the direction of where they want to go if you're serious about winning an election or moving the needle culturally in America today. Again, free enterprise, private ownership insinuating individualism, right? You as the individual have a private jurisdiction and sovereignty over your life. Also shows up in liberal. If you value individual rights, civil liberties, and free enterprise, you would be considered by the definition of the Oxford Dictionary a liberal, but also a conservative, all at the same time. Like I said, though, today's left wing of American politics really has nothing to do with liberalism. It has everything to do with authoritarianism. And I think we can prove that in a very simple conversation right here. Authoritarianism, from the Oxford Dictionary, is the enforcement or advocacy of strict obedience to authority at the expense of personal freedom. And it is a lack of concern for the wishes or opinions of others. If you think about the most prominent left-wing figures in American politics and American culture alike today, several names can come to mind, but you can just keep those to yourself or drop them in the chat. I want you to picture whether those people are enforcing or advocating for strict authority and strict obedience to one way of thinking, that you cannot disagree with them one bit or you're going to get canceled at the expense of personal freedom, of personal jurisdiction, of personal sovereignty, or whether those people are promoting individualism, whether they're promoting liberty, your freedom to decide what you want to do, whether they are promoting free enterprise and innovation from the individual mind. It's a pretty clear dichotomy that exists for me, at least, that truly American politics and Western politics as we know it, I think this could also apply to Canada, this can also apply to Western Europe, the needle has moved so substantially on what it means to consider yourself part of the right, if you're center of the right, or center right and going towards the right wing, or if you are center left and towards the left wing. Things have changed so substantially in the last few hundred years since the founding of our nation and the founding of other nations and overthrowing of totalitarian governments several hundred years ago in Europe, for example, that today's reality is the historical definition of both conservative and liberal would fall center right compared to anything else in our nation's history and in our world's history. And meanwhile, center left continues to move more and more and more authoritarian, more and more and more totalitarian, and more and more and more leftist rather than liberal. We talk about this a lot when I'm on high school and college campuses, but I think it would be interesting to bring up here on the stream as well in our last couple of minutes. But we often think about politics as like a line, right? We think about it as one linear spectrum where if you're really, really conservative, you are far on one side of the spectrum. And if you are really, really liberal, then you are far on the other side of the spectrum. And in reality, that really couldn't be further from the truth. Politics is not a line. If you've ever taken one of those political like quadrant quizzes and you're right libertarian or left libertarian or right authoritarian or left authoritarian, you'll understand that that quadrant square thing is really a flat version of a sphere, because politics looks a lot more like this than it does like this. It is a much more three-dimensional area of philosophy than this linear line with two opposing extremes than we realize. The truth is, if you look at politics like a big sphere, like a circle, you can be on the right side or you can be on the left side, but there's also a side up here and a side over here that is libertarian. Take your hands off of me, laissez-faire. I just want to live my life the way I want to live. Hands-off governance, promoting individual liberty, promoting civil rights, promoting individual rights that apply to the individual person. And over here would be authoritarianism, where it doesn't matter, at the expense of personal freedom, we are doing what we are going to do. These are the rules. You stick with it. You keep your head down. You keep your marching order, and you keep going. You can be on the left or the right and be more libertarian or more authoritarian. But the truth is, authoritarian leftists and authoritarian right-wingers have a lot more in common with each other than they do libertarian left-wingers and libertarian right-wingers. I think what we're seeing in American politics and in the Western world in particular today has a lot more to do with the split between authoritarianism and liberalism than right versus left. And all of that really comes down in perfect example to me with the idea that the traditional definition of conservative and the traditional definition of liberal are basically the same thing when you think about it in the context of American politics today. Like true liberalism. Don't hear the word liberal and think left wing or leftism or authoritarian, like you would assume the left wing of American politics to be today, but to promote individualism, to promote sovereignty over your own life, to promote private ownership, to promote free enterprise. Those two things are, by today's standards, conservative values. When it comes to conserving something, I think it's interesting that we phrase it in a really negative way in articles like this from Teen Vogue. They always say that you're adverse to change or you're trying to make sure that you're growing the government because you want to infringe on everybody else, right? They give several examples here about how the Republican Party, which is different from being a conservative, I want to say that very loud and clear. They say the Republican Party, who should be the conservatives of today, have done all kinds of things to grow the government. They did the war on drugs. They had the Iraq War both times. They give so much funding to the police. They eliminate your individual right, which doesn't exist, to an abortion. They say that you can't say gay in elementary schools, which is not true, objectively speaking. Please do your research on what's happening in states like Florida. And they're banning books from school. Again, not true. Please do your research on what's happening in states like Florida, because they are limiting your power by growing the power of the government. And they're saying that in this negative way, that conservatives, by conserving something, are inherently intolerant, that they're really hateful, that they're really bigoted, that they couldn't give two craps about where you're coming from or your life. When in reality, that's just not true. Holding true to tradition and traditional values is not a bigoted stance to take towards other people. It's not a hateful stance to take towards other people. It's understanding where we've come from throughout human history to understand how we can be more prosperous moving forward into our future. It's researching our heritage and our story as people, as humans, in what has worked really well throughout our experience here on Earth and what really, really hasn't. How God designed for us to be and how he really, really didn't, and where societies that once ruled the earth came crashing down and crumbled because they lost sight of where we came from in their quest to go somewhere new. There is absolutely room for both innovation and progress, true progress, not the progressivism of today that's really regressive, but true progress and conservation of the things and the values that we hold true at the same time. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. And I think, in fact, societies have been raised to positions of greatness and have accomplished amazing things throughout human history when both of those things coexist at the exact same time. When you can think about how you move forward in an ever-changing and an ever-complicated world, but also where we came from, not to lose sight of what brought us to where we are today, and not to totally reinvent the wheel of humanity, which we pretty much seem to be doing with every passing day in Western civilization today, throwing away all the rules and just doing it ourselves, which sometimes can be really good, but these days often look like getting rid of animals so that we can eat lab-grown meat, or growing babies in pods instead of just having a baby the fun way. Who would want to take the fun out of having a baby the fun way anyway, by the way? Just side note, but often rattles my brain. And when we try to have this like, let's do everything inverse or different from how we've ever done things in the past, that is inherently anti-conservative. But I don't want you to think that to be conservative and to conserve traditional values, to uphold tradition as a beautiful thing that should be brought forward into the future, means you are inherently averse to real progress or to real innovation, because that's not true either. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. And I think the most impactful conservatives of our nation's past and of our world's past have really understood the dichotomy between those two things, but also how they can be blended together. If you look at our nation's founding fathers, which today's leftists would tell you were all evil, they were all really bad people, they were a bunch of old white men and they had no idea what they were doing, and they were just bad people who wrote bad documents to create a bad nation, and that's why we have to burn it all down and start over again, which is a mantra I hear repeated over and over and over and over again from people in our generation, which blows my mind. More often, by the way, from the generation right in front of us, millennials, rather than Gen Z. But I hear this all the time. If you look at the political philosophy of almost every single one of our founding fathers, every one of them would be considered to be a conservative by today's standards in 2023. And these people were revolutionaries. They were willing to overthrow the system of old to create something new, but also holding on to the ultimate traditional value, right? We think that in order to be revolutionary, you have to abandon everything that you've ever done in the past to create something entirely new in the future. But that's not what our founding fathers did when they created the United States of America. They understood that far before the world ever had monarchies, far before the world ever had dictatorships, far before the world ever had authoritarian systems of government that were taking away civil liberties, we had God, and we had our individual God-given rights that were given to us not by a system of man-made power, but by something bigger than the world in its entirety, in its whole, that we could never possibly comprehend. And therefore, we ought to have a personal relationship with God, with ownership and sovereignty over our personal individual liberties, far more than a government is the gatekeeper of those things, starting with the right to life, your right to liberty, the right to the pursuit of happiness that are baked into our founding documents. And then, of course, we're echoed later in the Bill of Rights with your right to free speech, with your right to defend yourself, and so many others that we often take for granted every single day, but are rooted in the ultimate conservatism, the ultimate traditionalism, looking back through all of human history, that those things have always and will always exist in perpetuity, no matter what government says you can or cannot do, because well before we even had a concept of government, those were the gifts and the rights that were given to us by God, not by any president, not by any dictator, not by any monarchy. And yet, in holding true to the ultimate tradition, they did kind of blow it all up and start over again. They created a system of government that the world had never seen before, and arguably has been the most successful system of governance throughout all of human history, and truly revolutionized the world. They are an ultimate example of what it looks like for conserving something and traditionalism and innovation and progress to coexist beautifully and peacefully. And our inability to understand that come 2023, and I see this on both sides, with conservatives saying, well, we should just go back to a monarchy. I actually do see some people saying that. Or maybe we should have like a religious oligarchy or somebody in ultimate power that we don't have to worry about elections anymore because people are too stupid. But then I also see from the left, well, maybe all of this is really bad and we should just blow it all up and democracy is not really democracy anymore and we need to just try something new entirely and not even have citizenship and just have open borders everywhere and let's just do this all across the world. I see this coming from both sides. We have a fundamental misunderstanding of our nation's history and a fundamental misunderstanding of where we came from so that we may go forward into a better future for the next generation after us. And the next generation right after us is Gen Alpha. They are the children of millennials and they desperately need your prayers already. So if you're not already praying for them, please do so. But this is why you study history. This is why you understand what the struggles of generations before you were looking like. It's why we read our founding documents and we listen to historical podcasts and watch historical documentaries and biopics and all of the above. Because if we can't understand where we came from, we will never, ever have a roadmap for where we're going. And we certainly won't remember history well enough in our dark chapters of history to avoid repeating it. There's a lot to be said that at some point, the United States probably will cease to exist as we know it. And that's a really scary thought. It's something that we are fighting against with everything that we have to try to prevent from happening, because I do truly believe that our system of governance has revolutionized the world for the better. It's created individual liberty and planted the seeds of freedom all over the world, even in spite of dark chapters in our nation's history that I'm not personally proud of, and I don't think anybody necessarily should be personally proud of. But we understand those chapters so that we're never doomed to repeat them, and we're able to continue conserving our tradition and pushing progress forward all at the same time. Newsflash, Teen Vogue is not the arbiter of what a conservative actually looks like. You don't have to listen to them for that. But it is always a fun read to go pick apart their articles on their website and all of the things going on. One thing is clear, it has never been more important to speak the truth, especially in a world that is not just rejecting truth, but trying to rewrite it or overwrite it or create an inverted version of what the truth is. It is incredibly biblically true, but I think is just true, period, in our lives today. And we're seeing this in real time, that lies have become truth and truth have become lies. So wherever we can continue to defeat lies with objective truth, with historical truth, and with the tradition of the human story, that's where we're able to keep fighting back against our broken world that continues to try to fall apart on us every single day. Keep speaking up, keep being students of history, never lose your spark of learning and love of learning. I know it's nerdy, but hey, the nerds come out on top in the end. We get a glow up much after high school, okay? I'm just saying that to everybody who called me a nerd in my past. And I hope you guys always learn something every day on the stream that you never knew before. Don't forget to hit that follow or subscribe button as we are ending the stream today on whatever platform you are watching on. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. Thank you so much for your patience and your understanding with this being a pre-recorded stream, since I am going to the airport and I will be doing another pre-recorded stream tomorrow while I am in Alabama for a wedding. We're going to do a wedding themed stream tomorrow, talking about weddings these days in 2023 with the insane budgets and everything that is going on in the wedding industry. It's a lot to unpack that I am learning while I'm planning my own wedding, but it's going to be really fun. And I can't wait to see you guys there at 3 p.m. Eastern. Love you guys so very much. We will talk to you soon. See you tomorrow.